This is the most 80s vampire movie on the entire list for many, many reasons. The aesthetic, the content, and not least the advertising. The video box artwork for stuff like this would sear itself into your mind. For years before I actually saw Vamp, I knew that it had vampires in it. I knew it was kind of sexy and probably a little bit risque. As with many of the box art examples for video boxes in the 80s, the covers promised more than the content of the films ever really delivered. We don't have to dwell really too much on the similarities between this and From Dusk Till Dawn, and we don't need to make too much of a meal about it. They're apparent. If a couple of guys go into the seedier area of town and find a strip club that opens after dark and stays open all throughout the night and closes again before dawn. Whilst they're in the strip club, the owner performs a bizarre and quite stunning strip routine, and then after that they discover that the club is owned, run and populated by vampires, and they have to try and survive till dawn. That's it. It's From Dusk Till Dawn. Now let's talk about that signature striptease come art performance. There is no question that Salma Hayek in From Dusk Till Dawn, with her bikini and her snake, is better choreographed, sexier, downright more alluring and vampiric than Grace Jones's frankly bizarre art performance come strip routine, whatever the hell that was that she did. I understand that she basically just instructed the director to film whatever the hell it was she had planned to do, and she was going to do whatever she was going to do come hell or high water. And that's Grace Jones for you. She's a striking presence, I imagine, in real life, on stage and on screen. And in this, she does some sort of quasi-art piece covered in tribal body paint and a metal sort of bikini on and around and over a sort of Art Nouveau ceramic styled seat in the form of a sitting man, so that you sit in his lap, that she sort of drapes and jiggles herself over and ends her performance mimicking filleting this ceramic man. Okay, if that doesn't pique your interest, if you don't think to yourself, I'm unlikely to see anything like that anywhere else, maybe I will give this vampire movie a shot, then you are less curious, my friend, than me, and certainly less curious than Alice, and we will never meet down the rabbit hole. Whereas From Dusk Till Dawn started off as a sort of gangster heist movie and becomes a vampire movie, this movie again has a first act that is a completely different genre. It just happens to be the 80s college sort of frat house comedy genre. I've got to tell you, the jokes work. It's not a pastiche of a sort of frat house comedy. The dynamic between our two lead actors and the sort of zingy dialogue, it works. Even this many decades later, you're happy to spend time watching these guys and be with them. I feel you're not looking at your watch thinking, can we just get to the vampire stuff now, please? It's just once we do get to the vampire stuff, it's that much more fun because we put on a vampire movie, right, guys? When we get inside the club, it's populated by some wonderful characters. Dee Dee Pfeiffer Michelle Pfeiffer's sister, is excellent in this movie. She's a waitress in the bar and a part-time stripper there as well. She plays a character called Alison, or whose stage name is Amaretto. And she knows one of the guys. She knows Chris Makepeace. We sort of find out, it's teased out throughout the film, how they know each other. But her performance in this is great. She's peppy, she's up, she's optimistic. She's bubble permed, gum chewing, 80s tastic, and she's a hell of a lot of fun to watch when she serves them at the table and she says, "Hi, my name's Amaretto." "No, it's not." She's brilliant. There are other excellent characters in the bar, not least the character of Vic, who is kind of like, he runs the business side of things. Grace Jones as the head vampire, she's the owner, but she is not going to concern herself with ordering the beer in or paying the bills or the taxes, getting the books straight or anything like that. Vic does all of that, and a small amount of screen time as he gets, this is a fully fleshed out character. I would love a Vic spin-off movie, because it seems to my mind that in his human life he was so obviously connected to the mafia. He was, if not a made man, he was in those circles, and he's still kind of running the bar as though he was in those circles. He's got dreams of taking the club to Vegas, running a strip club in Vegas, and he loves all the stories about Vegas. And I imagine if any made men came into this club, they'd probably get a free pass and a free exit without being drained, just for him to be able to hear some authentic tales of Vegas. So I freaking love watching him, knowing that everyone in the bar is going to be drained dry before the club ends that night, but still wanting them to have a good experience, and to the point of putting little paper umbrellas in the glasses just to add some class. It's all about class. And we can't leave out Katrina, which is Grace Jones's character. She's an Egyptian vampire queen. Not the only one on the list. Watch my video for the hunger, and there's another Egyptian vampire there. Not the only vampire stripper either. There'll be a video coming for Graveyard Shift, aka Central Park Drifter, I think it's called, that also has a vampire stripper in it, briefly. But given that Grace Jones has no dialogue in this movie, she's grossly underutilized. She pretty much disappears for most of the second and third act, which is a very strange decision when you consider that you can't take your eyes off her. She is a dangerous presence, and I don't know how much acting she did, because Grace Jones kind of was like that in the 80s, completely unpredictable, almost otherworldly, seemingly without any of the filters that most of us have. I think she saw her whole life as a piece of performance art. So the performance that she gives in this just seems to be a magnified kind of version of herself, which is not to do down her performance. She is magnetic. You cannot take your eyes off her. You are always wondering what she's going to do next, when someone is going to die, and people die at her hands. She's a deadly, deadly vampire. Her seduction of AJ, Robert Russler's character, is one of the standout moments of the film, going from sexy, always weird sexy though, it's always weird sexy with Grace Jones, kind of weird and uncomfortable in the same way in A View to a Kill she kind of seduces Roger Moore. It's always, she's got a kind of sexuality that makes men uncomfortable, I guess, is the best way of expressing that, or at least that's the characters she played on screen. But going from that to devouring him is an excellent standout scene. And the vampires in this are full-on vamps, like a lot of the 80s, like in Fright Night, like in Lost Boys, when our vampires vamp out, they go all big teeth and bumpy headed and prosthetic makeup. Something which, a baton which was sort of like picked up and ran with in the 90s with Buffy the Vampire Slayer and Angel. That was kind of ignored in your Interview with the Vampires and your Twilight series and the like. Proper 80s vampires were demonic vampires with weird coloured contact lenses, jagged, ragged, broken glass teeth, and bumpy, grumpy foreheads. And this is absolutely no different. So, as I mentioned towards the start of the video, in aesthetic, this movie is as 80s as it gets. The first portion of the movie is like a campus comedy. When night falls, we enter a world that is washed with blue and pink neon. It's an MTV producer's wet dream. It's Miami Vice with vampires. There's lighting gels, purpley pink and green, that were pretty ubiquitous back then, sort of, I guess, trying to evoke the 1950s EC comic vibe. But you can see all the way throughout the Freddy's Nightmares TV series, and especially in Nightmare on Elm Street 4, the Dream Master, when you enter the dream state, there's lots of red and green gel lighting in the back, across the walls, splashed everywhere. Downtown, whatever city they're in Vamp, is that. It's a freaking Dire Straits MTV music video with Dutch angles all over the place, smoke machines, backlighting. Nothing looks more 80s. All you needed was Crockett and Tubbs in there and a bit of Phil Collins, and you were done. You could stick a fork in it. It's done. So, how 80s is Vamp? Dee Pfeiffer's character, wears fingerless lace gloves like Madonna, and she wears pink zebra print leggings and black and white tiger stripe jacket together, whilst chewing gum with a bubble perm. You've got all the Dutch angles, you've got all the neon, you've got all of the lighting gels. This is the distilled essence of the 80s. If I had to give this an 80s-tastic score out of 80 to tell you how 80s this movie is, the only way this movie could be more 80s is if Ronald Reagan featured as the president in the background and someone was watching MTV at the frat house and Ferris Bueller walked past in the background and you saw Robert Russell's character high-five Teen Wolf on the way to the strip club. This is the most 80s movie in 80s Vampire Month. It gets 80 out of 80. It's the 80s, 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 80s. I cannot say 80 anymore. I think you get the point.